Today, during our in-person gathering, I will be sharing with the Burlington family the thoughts and ideas and dreams that lie behind a project that we are about to launch to refurbish what we call our sanctuary, our worship space. It's the space where I'm sitting in now, and it's the space where we gather, when we gather all together as a church family to celebrate. If you've been around the Burlington family for any time, you will know that our life together centers around two very important values: community, building relationships that are real and vulnerable and that reach out to those around us. We spent a lot of time over the lockdown period and as we've got going again, talking about our community life. What perhaps we've missed out on the most, though, during our COVID pandemic has been our celebration when we're all able to be together. In so many ways, it's the lifeblood of our rhythms. And what we've noticed over the years is that our celebration space has lagged behind our community life because of the space where we gather. Our heart and our dream is that the worship space, our sanctuary space, will catch up with all that we believe God is doing with us as a family. You will be able to listen to everything that I shared during the in-person gathering on our Burlington Audio podcast channel. We'll put a link to that below, but you can find that wherever you pick up your podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, and the rest. But I want to share one fundamental truth that lies behind why we are launching this project at this time. The truth is this: God is faithful. I'm constantly reminded of God's faithfulness in the Burlington and to the Burlington family, because I'm often aware that we, the Burlington family, has been around for over 150 years. And during that time, God has been faithful again and again and again to this family in countless ways. One of the ways that we've seen his faithfulness is the provision of wonderful buildings. It's only a small part of God's faithfulness, but perhaps an important part nevertheless. I never cease to be amazed by those that planted this church over 150 years ago in 1856. That within 25 years they had outgrown the quite substantial buildings that they had built on Burlington Road and built the building that I'm now seated in on London Road, a massive 700-seater auditorium. It was that courage and faithfulness that got repeated multiple times, and more recently in the 60s with the redevelopment of Burlington Hall, and then most recently the journey that many of us can remember, the building of our church centre. It was God's faithfulness to us during that time that enabled us to complete what was then a £1.2 million project. But buildings is just a small part, isn't it, of God's faithfulness? And yet they are a picture, a window on what God is doing with us as a people. And when we built the church centre 10 plus years ago now, we were very conscious as a Burlington family that it was phase one of a three-phase project. That God was asking us to build this new building, but then as a second phase, in order to maximize the usefulness of the church centre, we would need to redevelop the space that I'm sitting in now. And then as a third and final phase, to redevelop Burlington Hall. As you may know, I'll often put off building projects for as long as possible. The real building is always the people. But there comes a moment when the buildings need to catch up. And I feel the same way that I felt at the time of us pressing the go button for the church centre. Now is the time, this is the moment for us to seize the opportunity that God has placed before us. And so in keeping with that vision, in keeping with the faithfulness of God shown to us through the building of the church centre, I believe now is the time for us to redevelop the space where we gather for our celebrations week by week. There was a conversation that really struck me. It was the summer before COVID. We were sitting in a country garden. The whole of the Burlington leadership team was present. And we were talking about the buildings and our life together and all that God was calling us into. And I remember someone saying that God has been faithful to us as far as we have been faithful. And it was such a challenging phrase because it struck with me. And what that person, that leader among us was observing is that week by week we have people on a Sunday and during the week come as far as the glass partition, the glass doors, but don't often venture into this particular part of our buildings. It was as if God had been faithful in building the kind of church we believe that He's calling us to be, but only as far as we'd been faithful. And so God is calling us to be faithful once more and to respond, to create a space here that is now more fit for purpose. The plan is very simple: to change what is a very rigid space into a much more flexible space, with flexible and responsive heating, with flexible and reordered seating, so that this space can be used in a multiple different ways to help us as a whole family gather together and express that sense of community that we have discovered is so important to us. That's the dream. And we'd love everyone in the Burlington family to be on this journey with us, that we would create a space that enables God to be even more at work among us than we have known hitherto. So I'd encourage you, pick up the podcast. I'd encourage you, burlington.church/refurb, where you can find out all about it. But more than that, I'd encourage you to find something today that reminds you of God's faithfulness. These buildings remind me of God's faithfulness. And because God has been faithful, may you this week find one way, a way to step out and be faithful to God in response. So join with us as we journey through this project, but above all else, join with us in celebrating God's faithfulness and all that He has for us in the days that lie ahead. God bless you this week.